Hello and welcome to my talk on astrology and its uses in ancient medicine. My name is Brynna Caffrey, and I know that some of you may be skeptical of such uses, but I assure you that once upon a time, uncovering divine wishes was at the base of healing in many civilizations. During this presentation, I will discuss such topics as what astrology is and the subsequent civilizations on which I have focused for my paper. These civilizations include Mesopotamia, Egypt, Rome, Greece, as well as some modern perspectives. At the end, I will also discuss the modern practices, but both for those who do not believe in astrology and those who have immersed themselves in a more spiritual way of life. These civilizations all took different perspectives and approaches towards the science of astrology in relation with healing practices. Some also have ample sources with documentation of their individual rituals and remedies, whereas others have limited or secretive records due to a constant change in leadership and stance on astrology. Egypt was a particular challenge due to the intense lack of information pertaining to a medical treatment involving either astrological means or even the mundane practices. Before anything else, let us answer the question of what is astrology. Well, astrology is the practice of studying the movement of various celestial bodies in the heavens in order to ascertain the influence they will have over mortal behaviors, depending on how they have arranged themselves in the sky. Currently, this is thought of as a pseudoscience, but in ancient civilizations it was deemed a way of life. As has been thought, this does bear quite a big deal of importance to the ancient thoughts on healing, as many of those civilizations believed that ailments or natural disasters were brought about by displeasing the gods in some fashion. It was crucial to be able to divine the proper treatment, and thus the root cause in order to avoid repeating the same offense in the future. Astrology was also used as a means of properly collecting herbs and giving them the proper infusion of divine healing prior to administration. Ancient civilizations put a lot of power into the will of the gods, and thus had the necessary deference to worship them properly in order to keep them happy and bestowing gifts, as opposed to plagues and famines. Astrology was important to divine the cause of illness, as well as to properly treat it in order to be the most successful. Mesopotamia is one of the oldest civilizations to use astrology, and thus deemed to be the originator of much of the belief system. As a culture, they used to practice rituals to invoke healing, such as neomania, which would begin on the 15th day when the moon and the sun are equally present. It was important that the patient first address the moon, and then the sun after having entered a reed hut facing north, where it was crucial to make libations in the west to the moon and east to the sun. These directional references give a good understanding that these rituals were performed at dawn when the moon was setting and the sun was rising. There were also prayers uttered in conjunction with the preparation of healing concoctions. This was the main part of herbalistry, whereby one would create a healing potion and make a prayer, generally a wagon prayer, to the first star or dipper's handle. This would be followed by the concoction spending the night under the healing stars and constellations, specifically those in reference to Gula, the healing goddess, such as the goat constellation. The practice may have been sufficient sometimes, but it was also important to employ the healing potion at the correct time, or it may be rendered useless. This was why herbalisry was used in conjunction with Katarchic astrology, or the astrology that put a particular emphasis on timing of activities in order to gain the most from one's actions. Not only did Mesopotamians use astrology for healing, but they also used it as a daily practice in order to gain the day's omens and incoming wars and potential famines. The ancient Egyptians were users of medical astrology in that they mentioned it in their astrological and scientific papyri, the Carlsberg Papyri collection, in conjunction with each other. The Egyptians also attempted to classify botanicals not just for medicinal use, but also for taxonomical reasons. Unfortunately, there are very few medical sources for astrology and other uses in ancient Egypt other than these papyri, which provide only information from the first half of the second millennium BC. This lack of information put studies at a serious disadvantage and therefore made this section of the study very minimal at best. We know very little about astrology in ancient Egypt other than what has been published in the papyri, and although this is a very fruitful resource, has a very limited time frame as well as does not cover all aspects of Egyptian life in terms of applications. The most we know is how they used astrology to create the 365-day year from the observation of stars and the use of the 36 different decans. Other than this, there is very little written and not enough to be useful or corroborated for the ancient Egyptians and their use of medical astrology. On the other hand, they have very useful references for natal horoscopes and how those were conducted, as well as what they used to look for in terms of health, wealth, prosperity, down to very in-depth and minute details. The ancient Greeks were using medical astrology, which was grown out of Hermetic philosophy, which emphasized the actions from above or the heavens, mirroring those on earth and vice versa. Hence the reason for engaging the stars in all aspects of human life. This belief of the earth matching the sky also led the Greeks to believe that the microcosm of the body would also mirror nature and the natural landscape. Thus, by harmonizing the body, one also opens up the necessary channels to become one with nature and the greater life force. It was crucial to know how to treat the body to have the optimal outcome for any type of medical action. It related to a constitutional type of healing, which was individual specific and made a man know himself. As Socrates famously said, "Man, know thyself." Not only was astrology a crucial part of the diagnostic process, but it also helped the physician ascertain whether the ailment was simply an imbalance in the body or linked to a greater cosmic reason, karma perhaps, where it was potentially caused by the wrongdoings either unto the gods or another person, which has caused their current predicament. Through the treatment process, Greek astrological medicine put a high significance on the individual program, which would be tailored to suit the person's specific constitution, which would alter how they received and processed remedies. Some Greek philosophers were on board with the concept and others were heavily opposed. For example, through research, it has been discovered that there are varying opinions on whether both Hippocrates and Galen's perspectives were correct. Some sources say one was opposed and one was for, but it constantly flips them around. From what I have found, it would appear that Hippocrates was against the concept, but somehow many of his ideas showed up both from and in astrological medical treatments throughout unknown means. Whether or not he was in favor, it is interesting to see that over the different disciplines, concepts were shared or stolen when things seemed to be having a significant positive impact on patients and the pleasure of the gods. In ancient Rome, there was an obsession with knowing the future prior to its occurrence in all matters of personal health, wealth, and marital relations. The Roman upper classes were skeptical of using astrology for anything but daily horoscopes, but this does not rule out those who may have been amongst the lower classes and did not possess the funds to constantly visit a physician with respect to minor or perceived to be minor ailments. It may very well have been cheaper to consult an astrologer for these cases. We do, however, know that the stance on astrology changed from ruler to ruler, with some being avid supporters and some deeming it high treason, which may have made it difficult to ascertain specifics on the way Romans used to practice during many periods of Roman history. For example, Hadrian was the only known emperor who took an avid interest in the practice and is a practicing astrologer himself. Astrology reached its peak for usage under Severi, dating from AD 193 to 235, as he himself consulted the Chaldeans or the Mesopotamians. or matters relating to war and his wife's fidelity to him. Needless to say, however, consulting an astrologer for the health of the emperor was always illegal and usually led to death. We do know that Augustus put enough stock into such a practice so far as to publish himself in the paper with his horoscope with the necessary information to supposedly calculate the exact day of his death. This may also have been conducted in order to prove his legitimacy to the Principate, as he was not the biological son of Caesar, rather the adopted one. Generally, when people in power ban something, it is plausible to believe that they have put enough power into such a practice to be scared of the damage it could potentially inflict on their position. However, we must also think about the religious and political state of Rome, when such rulers were heavily for or against the practice, by means of stability and the public believing the legitimacy of their claim to rule. Regardless of the amount of Romans who used astrology for medical treatments, it was widely believed that the future could be foretold by means of divining the stars and other celestial phenomena. It must be understood that although the majority of this research endeavor has placed significant emphasis on ancient civilizations and their uses of astrology in the medical field, but there must also be some thought towards recent increase in the New Age spirituality in the last half-century. It has been discussed in the media how natural remedies are less effective than pharmaceuticals, and this may well be true. But it is also important to look at this debate from the perspective that one is currently comparing a nimble and precise fine woodworking tool to a sledgehammer used for demolition. Yes, pharmaceuticals are fast-acting and can fix many problems at the offset, but are they only hitting the necessary agents, or are they operating on a scorched earth policy? Yes, natural remedies are slower to act generally, but they are softer on the body and generally only attack what the body needs help with, including the root of the problem as opposed to just treating symptoms. As humans who have used natural remedies for millennia, is it not possible to come to an agreement that both of these are effective in their own fields? For example, taking some warm manuka honey and lemon, with perhaps some oregano oil for a sore throat or the common cold, may be more effective at treating it than those that mask the symptoms like Tylenol or Benadryl. On the other hand, taking anti-rejection or anti-cancer drugs after a transplant or being diagnosed with cancer would seem a sounder solution than anything used when humans do not perform such medical marvels or have the information regarding benign versus metastasizing cancer tumors. The bottom line is that there must be some choice left in treatment, since it has been proven that many cultures and diverse civilizations have thrived on similar methods of treatment, but it also must be said that modern medicine has extended the human lifespan tremendously. The main difference between the two approaches is that natural remedies tend to be more personalized and therefore are specific to the individual person and their bodily composition, which means that they will work differently for every person. Many pharmaceuticals which work for everyone due to sometimes overpowering nature of the medication, neither of which is better than the other, and both have their uses, and therefore can be used in conjunction with each other or on their own depending on personal belief systems. It is important to know that either option is all right, so long as the person believes in their choice and has faith they will do what they are said to do. Here is a sample of the sources consulted in the process of compiling both this presentation and the paper. Other sources will have been added prior to submission and upon request should anyone like further reading on ancient authors. I have omitted some sources as they have not been used to fill the slideshow, rather provide context and background in the paper. Thank you so much for watching this presentation, and I encourage you to take some time out of your day on Sunday, March 14th at 10:30 in the morning in order to ask me any questions about the research, clarification, topics, or just have some good-hearted scholarly discussion on the topic of astrology and medical fields in ancient civilizations.